Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now today's video is going to be a little bit different than usual. If you've been following my channel for a while now, you probably realize that the bulk of what I do is outdoor gear, outdoor reviews, outdoor excursions and things like that. But today's video is just going to be a little bit different. You know, it's one of these things where, today we're going to talk a little bit actually about vehicle maintenance. This to me is one of those things that just kind of comes out in the mix. And here's what I mean. So, yes, typically I'm into the outdoor gear and outdoor reviews and things like that. But at the same time, I also like to do whatever vehicle maintenance I can on my own. And that's just typical between all of my things. House maintenance, vehicle maintenance, different outdoor equipment that I have. I like to do as much as I can by myself for a couple reasons. First is it's really good for me, just to have the general understanding of this stuff and how it works. Second is that, quite honestly, it can save you a lot of money. Does it take a little bit of time? Yeah, sure, but it also takes time to bring your equipment or your vehicles to service to have it serviced. So to me, this is actually a great way to improve general life skills, general ability. It all comes out in the mix, so learning how to kind of get your wrench on ultimately does come out in the mix when you're in different environments, different situations. If you're into survival or prepping or anything like that, obviously general mechanical skills could certainly come into play. So what we're going to do today is I'm just simply going to change the oil in my truck and also rotate my tires, which is just super basic. A lot of people get a little overwhelmed at vehicle maintenance, and it's really nothing that's all that difficult in general. You just need to take your time, have a basic understanding, have a few of the right tools, be patient, and really just do it and learn. So I'm going to go through this today just for everybody else in case you're interested. And also this video won't be the typical general quality. I'm just going to shoot this with my cell phone to keep it easy and effective. Now obviously I'm not a professional. This is just the way I've been taught and the way I do things. I'm sure somebody's going to watch this and be able to add some additional tips and tricks. So by all means, I'm all ears. I do not really claim to be an expert. I'm just somebody that's trying to maintain my own things and do the best that I can. First things first, I'm going to be changing the oil on my truck. I have a Ram 1500. It's a 2011. I've been maintaining this on my own ever since I got it. So not only today am I going to be changing the oil, but also rotating my tires. It's early December. Snow's about to fall where I live, and so I want to be ahead of it. I want to make sure I have fresh oil so I don't need to deal with it throughout the winter, and also rotate my tires so that I can extend the life of them. So at this point, I just have some real basic things that I'm going to be using here. You can see the tire iron I'm going to use to get my tires off, some cardboard to lay down on the ground so I can lay on it. I got a couple of rags, and then basically the waste oil pan, a funnel. You see my oil, my jack stands, and my jack. Really pretty basic. And then I just have a couple other hand tools I'm going to need. I got to pull those out in a minute. Now just basically for the jack and the jack stands, making sure that you have equipment that is rated for the weight of the vehicle that you're going to be lifting up. So in this case, basically making sure it's capable of holding up my truck while I'm working beneath it. And that's really the main thing you need to be concerned with, is the overall weight of the vehicle and then the rating of the jack and stands. So the first thing I'm doing is just basically orienting my cardboard beneath the truck. Now getting into this real quick, I'll climb under, and you can see here is the oil pan with the plug. And that's really pretty simple to get to. But the main consideration that I want to make right now is that this cardboard is underneath there just to protect my driveway in case a little bit spills. You kind of can't completely avoid it. So that's one of the things, is just sort of protecting my driveway and creating a spot to catch any oil that could potentially drip on the ground. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just slide the jack into place and get it positioned. You can see there's a nice large cross member under there, which I'm going to use to lift the front of the truck. So I'm going to get this positioned, and we'll go from there. So at this point, I just have it under enough to get things established. I'm not going to lift up on the truck quite yet. What I want to do is, because I'm rotating my tires today, I'm going to actually crack the bolts on these tires before I lift it off the ground, because once the tires are in the air, it's not possible to do that. So I'm just going to prepare this by cracking the bolts and getting this thing kind of established before I get it off the ground. And now I'll just do that to all 4 tires, and I'll be ready to get this up off the ground and onto the jack stands. Now, another detail worth noting is you should always have your parking brake fully engaged when you're going to be working underneath the truck or jacking it up. That'll help prevent it from potentially rolling it all on you. So always lock in that parking brake is a must. And just another little detail that makes things easier later, I like to pop the hood before I get this thing up in the air, just because at that point it's that much higher up and more difficult to work on it. There's no reason to go too high, jacking it up just high enough that the wheel will spin freely. I mean, the reality is you've got to lift this thing up and take it down and all that, so really the closer to the ground the better. And that just buys me enough space to work under the vehicle nice and easy, get the jack stands under there at an appropriate height, keeping this truck as level as possible. I've picked the most level spot of my driveway to do this to begin with, so it should work out pretty good. And at this point, I can get my jack stands under here and then take care of the back of the truck. Now on the back of the truck, people have always asked me, where do you jack it up from? There's no real good spot, but I'm sure somebody would say not to do this, but I just jack it up from the base of the center differential in the back here, and it's always worked okay for me. I've never had a problem. Doesn't seem to cause any real damage. And so I just kind of get this thing going from the middle here. And the same idea, I'm only going to go up as basically minimally high as I need to just to get the tires off and be able to work beneath the truck easily. Now I'm doing my best to get these jack stands really as wide as possible to have the best stance so that's the most sturdy. But for the most part here, it looks pretty good. So you can see I have it positioned right beneath the axle here. So now I'm going to lower the back down onto the stands and we can get this thing going. I'm going to start with the oil because I was driving my truck earlier for a little bit and it's nice and warm and it'll flow easy, and I think it's cooled down enough that I'm not really going to burn myself. So here's the cap. Take the cap off. I leave it up in the front where I'm going to see it and not accidentally forget to put that back in. And then the dipstick I'm going to pull out. So I'm just going to get my rag and I'm going to clean these off real quick. So now that I have my oil stick and dipstick pulled, I'm going to slide my waste oil pan underneath that plug. So get it close to positioned where I think the fluid is going to spill the furthest out. It kind of arcs out at you and then eventually will dribble down. So it may need a little adjustment as this thing's draining out. And so now I need to get under there and actually take that bolt off. And we'll start to drain it. Now the key is that I took the dipstick and oil cap off to allow the ventilation so that this will actually drain out. Otherwise it's kind of like the soda straw effect where some of the oil could get stuck in the, different parts of the that sort of oil loop there. And so anyway, I got this pretty much prepared. Let's drain this out. So for my truck, this is a 13mm socket. Figures it's American, but uses metric on a lot of the bolts. So anyway, this should come free without too much difficulty here, just because I do this quite regularly. And yep, just a little bit of pressure there, and this thing came off. So at this point, it should be finger tight, and we'll drain this out. Just making sure again everything's where it needs to be, and silly detail, but make sure that this is open so that you don't end up with oil all over the ground. And this will splash, so I like to get out of the way here as I pull this plug because I don't want it to splash all over me. You're gonna get a little oil on you, but that's not a big deal. Try to grab this from the top, keep a little pressure on it so it doesn't just blow out on you until you're ready to pull it out of the way. Get to the last thread, which I'm close, and here we go. Voila. So keep the plug out and drain this thing down, and I'm just going to monitor this as it drains. It's going down into the waste oil pan, no problem. This is 6 quarts here. You can see that this starts to trail down just a little bit, so I'll move this pan with it to try to catch as much as possible as it drains down. And I'm at just the slightest incline here, and you can see the way that's draining. That's going to actually help me get the bulk of the oil out of here. So I'm going to let that finish up and continue to drain out for a little bit, and then we'll put the plug back in and fill her up. So while that's finishing draining out, I'm just making sure that my funnel is nice and clean. Obviously I don't want any dust or impurities getting into the oil, because that would completely defeat the purpose. This lays around in the garage all the time, so just doing my best to kind of clean it off. Down here where it's going to actually go into the oil fill, and that thing's just about done. So at this point, let's just get that plug back in and fill her back up. So now I'll just place that nice clean funnel up in there and be ready. I'm going to hop under the truck and get this plug put back in here, and then I can start filling the fresh oil. So, just sliding in here. This is complete. A couple little drips, but that doesn't matter anymore. And usually what I'll do is just take a touch of the oil and just make sure the threads are coated so that it can come out with relative ease the next time. And then also on that gasket, so that the gasket doesn't get frozen to the rusty metal. And then when I tighten this, I actually don't go ridiculously tight. I just go tight enough that it snugs up, and just give it a little bump there. So just enough to snug it, but I don't over tighten, and it'll stay perfectly fine. And voila, complete with no oil in the driveway. So that's already a good start to this project. Now this is where things for me get pretty messy. You can see my oil filter there. It's relatively easy to get to, but hard to change without getting oil everywhere. And then directly beneath it, I have my jack stands. So this is where I probably make a mess of the driveway. So I'm doing my best to position this cardboard under here to catch what I can. And then you can see this like makeshift sort of spout here is supposed to catch what waste oil comes out and then drop into my waste bucket here, which still has plenty of room for the little bit that's going to come out of here. But let me try to get that filter out of there, and we'll see how it goes. So this is where it's pretty easy to get oil on your face if you're not careful. And you should be able to spin this without too much difficulty. So my hands are just a little bit slick here. And yes, it's coming. So try to keep this vertical as I get this off here. So spinning it. All right, so now it's loose, and I don't know, I don't have a great feeling about how clean this is gonna be. I'm just cracking it so that the oil, oh, it's missing. Come on. All right. So now it's coming into the bucket. So the cardboard did its job and did catch the bulk of this. All right. So now crack it a little more. It's coming off, and this is where the bulk of the mess is going to happen, if it's going to happen. Oh, I did it. And it's out. And no mess. Miraculous. So one of the things that people don't really know is that on your new filter, you just want to run some waste oil around the gasket so that when you put it on, it doesn't really get like frozen onto the metal of the engine. So just making sure that you get some waste oil coated on there, and then this you don't need to over tighten at all. So I just go really till it snugs up, and that'll make sure that in the future I can get that back off. I don't use wrenches. I just go kind of hand tight, and for the most part that's all it needs. So now with the filter and plug in place, I'm going to start filling the new oil. Now my truck needs 6 quarts, and this is a 5-quart jug. So I'm going to put these 5 quarts in, let it settle. Then I'm going to do my tire rotation and drop the truck, off the jack stands. And after that, then I'll put the last quart in, just because it might not need the entire full quart and I don't want to overfill it. So I'll just finish this up with this 5-quart jug here, and then I'll take care of the last quart once it's done on the ground. Now for the tires, it's pretty easy. What's going to happen is this tire is going to go to the back. Now that back tire is going to go to the front on the other side. And then the same thing on the other side. As we come over here, this tire is going to go to the back, and then that tire is going to go to the front on the other side. And that makes sure that you get nice even wear. You can't just flip-flop both sides or just rotate front to back, because that wouldn't be a true rotation. And so what you're doing is basically crisscrossing the rear tires up into the front, and then bringing the front straight to the back. So let's get this going. Now, one of the things worth mentioning is when you get this to this point, you probably just want to take a real quick look at things. I mean, obviously at some point pretty soon I'm going to be due for rotors. Actually, my pads are fine, but this is my second set of pads on these rotors, and if I was to do it again, I definitely, while I was at that point having this all taken apart and putting the pads in, I would have done the rotors. But I don't know, it was just the choice I made at the time, for better or for worse. And just looking around, kind of making sure, I mean, is there corrosion? Yes, but, nothing cracked, nothing damaged. Just want to make sure that while I get a good look at this, everything looks to be in decent shape. So at this point, I pretty much have this finger tight to the best of my ability. There's a little more to go, but now that I have it at that point, I'll go around it really with the wrench and tighten it up. So I'm going to do all 4 sides right now the exact same way, and then tighten them up, and then get the truck on the ground and tighten them up again. and that should pretty much do it for the rotation. So the main thing worth noting is that after driving it for a period of time, I'd say, the first time after you take it out, you probably want to come back and check them just to make sure that they stay tight, because this stuff can loosen up on you after a few miles. So what I'll do is I'll keep my wrench with me, and then after the first time I go drive this around, I'll come back and tighten up on everything again just to make sure it didn't loosen up, and then I'll check them after another period of time, maybe another week or so, just to make sure that everything's good. So anyway, let me finish up these tires, and then we'll get the truck on the ground, and that'll pretty much wrap up this project. Now, one thing you may notice is that I'm tightening up in a crisscross pattern, so you always want to go across so that you're keeping the, I'd say, torque nice and even as you snug these up around the entire pattern. So you're basically going in a sort of star pattern on this. At least I have a 5 lug. It would be the same for any other lug setup. You basically go in like a star pattern, just to snug it up nice and even and pull it straight. Needs a little grease there. I always try to lower this as slow as possible, which is sometimes hard because the mechanism on this jack, oh, there it goes, can sometimes go quick on me, but it's going nice and easy, nice and slow. Let her down. Ba-boom. And with that, the rotation's pretty much done. Now, as I said, I'm going to go around one last time now that it's on the ground and just really snug these up nice. Check them at those periods and intervals I talked about. But that rotation is done. I had only put 5 of the 6 quarts that I needed in here. So now that this has been on the ground for a little bit, I'm going to get my dipstick in here. And I'm going to check the fluid level. See where I stand, putting it in and removing it here. As I look at this, it's actually right now, and you're not going to be able to see, but it is at the very top of the add zone. So there was obviously still some oil in here, and then even at that, at this point, I can run the engine and circulate it around, and then let this thing get up to temperature, and then settle out for a little bit, and then I'll check it again. And if it's low at that point, I will add some more. But if it's good, I don't want to overfill it. So it is at the full level right now, and I think that pretty much, for the most part, covers it. And I just want to make sure that I put all these caps back in here and get everything situated the way it's supposed to. And really at this point, that is pretty much a wrap. And then the last bit of detail is I am going to go through my tires now, and I'm going to add some air because it's getting colder, and I do have a tire pressure monitoring system, and as you can see here, it does look like my front tires now are low, but that's because the front has the weight of the engine and these tires came out of the back, and then the back, you can see, are sitting nice and firm. So at this point, I feel as though I definitely need to touch up these tires, get the tire pressure to where they need to be. I'm going to go to the maximum required pressure, which for me on these is 44 pounds. So I'm going to bring them all to 44 pounds. And I know as the temperature continues to drop over the next couple of weeks, really into that like Arctic sort of winter, I can see that the jet stream is changing and it's going to get cold pretty quick. So anyway, that will leave me set up and I will be good to go. So that, my friends, is pretty much a project. So all right, guys, there you have it. I mean, not my typical video, but I thought that was definitely worth putting together. You know, it's one of those things. I mean, yeah, you talk about your gear and all these excursions, but let's be realistic. You know, these vehicles are what gets us to those excursions, and it's something that we rely on. They're very expensive and cost us a lot of money, and, you know, we'll rely on them in a pinch if it's an emergency or, heaven forbid, a survival situation. You know, like I said, it is what gets us out into the field and where we can actually enjoy ourselves and enjoy our hobby. So some maintenance from time to time helps prolong the life. And overall, it's just generally good to be able to do it on your own and use your hands, use some tools. I mean, this total process for me took a little bit longer just because I was filming, but I'm looking at just about an hour and 15 minutes of actual wrench time. So, you know, pretty short in terms of the duration, and something I can say I did myself. I've had a chance to inspect my vehicle and overall check out the condition to make sure it's okay. So all in all, it's definitely worth it. So all right, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.